Dato Seri, good morning and great to have you with us. I have to start with your reaction to what's been going on with regards to this whole coronavirus thing. You've been pretty outspoken and also vocal in how the government has been handling, or rather mishandling, this crisis. 900 people infected, 2 dead. What do you think the government should be doing right now?
Disconcerting, of course. I mean, worried because the impact is pervasive. It's not a question of only death or sickness, but it's affecting the entire population. I think what we need is a very concerted, clear direction. We need a leadership that has clear policies, firm, resolute. We don't need to talk about security measures. We need to impress upon the public that this is a very serious, incredibly worrying situation, that we need economic, social, medical programs, and this must be laid down to the people very clearly. I understand this is a new government, it's a fragile government. Notwithstanding, we are with the government in all efforts to deal with this issue.
But Dato Seri, what do you think the government of Muhyiddin Yassin, the new government of Muhyiddin Yassin, should be doing more of? Tun Mahathir Mohamad, just a short while ago, came out with a stimulus package, 20 billion ringgit worth. That is not enough in your mind?
That was prior to the crisis. This is already considered to be quite irrelevant. We have a situation that demands a more concerted effort. The economic team must look at the requirements. We need to pump in a lot of funds because you cannot just close shops and eating outlets and then say stay at home. Fair. What do they eat? We are talking about people struggling to survive. So these issues must be resolved. We are talking also about medical facilities. Do we have the capacity? This is not going to end next week. It is going to be going to escalate. We must learn from the experience of China or Singapore, or countries that have quite effectively dealt with the situation. We must anticipate that this problem would escalate, and we are not prepared. The hospitals, the clinics, the medical team, all this must be dealt with. And that's why I think the government must not only talk about staying at home. Yes, I fully support that. We must stay at home. I'm staying at home. But we have to deal with the situation. We must impress the population, the people at large, the villagers, that they must really have some form of discipline. But at the same time, the government must take measures. And this is what I think is lacking in this country. We are not seeing a clear, coherent plan, a concerted effort.
Okay. Dato Seri, specifically, what measures do you want the government to take? What additional measures?
Number one, we have to have an inventory, what is required in our hospitals. The tests, the medical team, the facilities. We must know exactly what is required, and we must spend enough to make sure that we have the resources, urban, suburban, rural, and the rural heartland. Number two, the economic measures. We can say that we have 600 ringgit or 300 ringgit, but what about the poorest section of our community? I know from my constituency where I have to go because they are struggling to live. It is not enough to say stop operations, but it requires funds. And this is where the economic team must be able to allocate enough resources for that purpose. Number three, of course, some of the security measures. I think what is being emphasized now is that if the police are not able to handle, we have to have the army to come in. It's actually absurd to me to ask the army to come in at that period when the police can handle. We should use all efforts possible to impress upon the public. We still have, for example, congregation in the mosque, for example, last week, here and Indonesia. We should have just stopped that. There is no basis or rationale to suggest we will have a fatwa committee to discuss. We need to exercise some authority to make sure that the health and the security of the country is paramount. We need effective, firm leadership.
So, okay, Dr. Seri, so to be clear, one of the measures you think in terms of social distancing that should be implemented in Malaysia, you think, is to stop people from going to mosques. Is that right?
Yes, they should have been firm from the beginning. Mosques or churches or temples. This false sense of religiosity. I mean, the survival, the security, the health of the community is paramount. You can always pray at home, as an example. Of course, they have now announced, but it'll be 2 weeks after the event. It's 2 weeks late. I think this is a clear example where the leadership is a bit hesitant. They want to portray themselves as probably a bit religious, so they delay. And you know, the problem, part of the problem stemmed from the congregation of the tabligh, the mosque program, and now we have to deal with it. But I think still it's not too late. We have to anticipate more problems, but we have to be more resolute, firm, and effective in our measures.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Seri, we have this virus, a pandemic. We also have a financial market meltdown. Is this, in your mind, and you lived through it 12, 13 years ago, is this worse than the GFC, the global financial crisis, what we're going through now?
Well, right now it is close to that. But I think I anticipate that with the trends going in Malaysia, which anticipate more problems, I would certainly suggest that the government take measures now, because it's going to be, it's not going to be better, but it's going to get worse in the next few days and weeks. And for that matter, look at the ringgit, look at the share market, but look at the massive layouts and unemployment, and the closure of all these small eating outlets. You know, unlike more successful industrial nations, the eating outlet is massive operations that keep the poor segment of the community survive, selling, you know, cakes and mee and noodles, which has to be stopped. And this will drag down. I'm not too obsessed with just the market. I'm more concerned about the general livelihood of our people. And I think in dealing with the situation, we have to look at both the economic fundamentals and the impact on the poorer segment of the community, which generally governments tend to neglect.
Okay, fair enough. If we could get very quickly to Malaysian politics, Dr. Seri, I think the key question everybody wants to know right now is whether PH, Pakatan Harapan, your group, has the numbers, has the seats to form a government. Can you be clear about the numbers, whether you have them or not, one? And also, second, what about a no confidence vote by, let's say, May? Is that a reality, potentially?
Martin, our priority now is, of course, the virus, the national security, and the survival of our people. But of course, we also consider that this government is a backdoor government, illegitimate and treacherous in many ways. And now they lack policies. They are now helpless, but we are in the position not to exploit on this, and therefore to support any effective measures. But mind you, this is a proof to the people of Malaysia that a treacherous backdoor government would not survive. It is fragile. We have leaders, ministers, including Minister of Home Affairs, instead of looking at this issue of the virus and the security, trying to entice people, calling up MPs from our party and persuading them, promising all sort of perks, etc., to join them. You can see as a proof and evidence that they don't have the numbers. But still, I would say for now, for the next 1 or 2 weeks, my focus is the country, the virus, the economy, and the welfare of the common people. But I remain very optimistic because I know about the numbers, what we need to do in the next few months.
Okay, and do you think a no confidence vote can be called by May in Parliament?
We'll see the situation. I mean, the unfolding. I think people are more concerned about their welfare, their survival, and the impact of the virus. And I don't think I would want to deal with that situation of no confidence vote. But what is apparent is that this government is not confident enough, is certainly fragile. And I think our role as the opposition is to assure them, do your job effectively now.
Okay. Dr. Sri, Tun Mahathir Mohamad, nobody is ruling him out yet. He's come out just recently with statements, and this is not the first time he's said it, saying that the problem in his mind was that yourself, Dr. Sri Anwar, you were too impatient to take over as the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Is that true? Is that fair?
Yeah. Never mind. Mahathir would continue to contradict himself and make promises and renege on them. So I don't think it is fair for me to say more. But what is important is everybody knows that I've waited for 21 years. I mean, an impatient man wouldn't have waited that much. Number two, I've given him that opportunity, the latitude to govern without interference. All right. Number three, he questioned my role in trying to get all the races together. I'm a Malaysian. I'm a Malay Muslim. The majority, of course, Malays and Muslims. But my Chinese, Indians, Ibans, and Dayak friends are part of my family in Malaysia. And you don't tell me, after 62 years of independence, that I don't need a multiracial party.
Okay, well, let's talk about multiracial politics versus racial politics, if we could. A lot of demographers have come out and said that by the year 2040, the ethnic Malays will constitute 75% of Malaysia's population, which is going to make it very, very difficult to work with groups like DAP, which is primarily Chinese, and it lessens the appeal of multiracial politics, which is your thing. Is that fair? And if that's the way demographics is moving, how do you fight that, push back against that?
Notwithstanding demography, Martin, this is our country. We can be 90% Malays, but 10% non-Malays, non-Muslims are members of our family. We will have to have the resolve, the strength, the courage to state that fact and to ensure that every single Malaysian must be given this right and accord the privilege. What needs to be assisted is affirmative action to help the poor irrespective of race. I know this is a contentious issue. I understand the frustrations, exasperation of many Malays because they have been quite neglected, not necessarily by the Chinese, but the corrupt Malay leaders who have squandered billions and come and tell us now that, we need Malay leaders. We need good, incorruptible, effective, courageous leaders.
Okay, fair enough. And I have to ask you this. One of the worries or fears with the new Muhyiddin government is that with UMNO back in play now, people like former Prime Minister Najib Razak could either get off lightly or get off completely. How much of a risk is there of that happening, do you think?
There is, of course. This country must subscribe to the rule of law, not personal vendetta. Our problem in the past, with the past Prime Minister, is probably to be seen to be too personal against some personalities. I don't share that view. I believe strongly in the independence of the judiciary and the rule of law. And I think if the present government led by Muhyiddin fail in this resolve, I don't think he will ever be forgiven and will be condemned in history.
Okay, Dato, very quickly, just a few minutes left. One key question I've always wondered myself over these years, is whether or not you actually believed Tun Mahathir Mohamad's promise to hand over power to you, to allow you to become Prime Minister eventually. Do you still believe him?
Well, not now, but then I thought when he came, he seemed to be quite sincere, came to see me when I was in prison, in the courthouse, and appealed for my support and says, look, Anwar, we have to work together, and made promises in private, in public, signed documents, and what else? I mean, I'm just human. And I take people at face value, and I think people do change with age, with wisdom, but I am not necessarily right always. And in this particular case, I apologize. I was wrong. No regrets.
Okay. And finally, Dr. Seri, I mean, this whole political ordeal that you've gone through, which has dragged on for decades, has seen you in jail, sodomy charges. You've been toppled from the very heights of power. You were number two, about to ascend to be the Prime Minister, and then all this happened. I've always wondered all these years, there must be so much anger, bitterness, resentment, potentially even jealousy. How have you dealt with all of this as a person?
Faith, good wife and family, and you believe in it is a conviction. You believe in it. I mean, if you have so much enmity and hatred, you will not be able to survive. So I think we, que sera, sera, we have to move on. And the plight of the people surpass my personal predicament.
Okay. And what if, Dr. Seri, in your lifetime, and you are 72 now, what if in your lifetime you do not become Prime Minister? At what stage do you literally give up? And would you retire, or would you stay engaged and involved in Malaysian politics in some way, shape, or form?
Well, of course, I'm mindful of the fact, the limitations, and it is up to the parties and the Malaysian generally to decide. But I'm quite settled. I can go and give some lectures and probably be on air with CNBC from time to time. But I think I am quite settled. I'm a happy man.